Hey guys, this morning we stand together at the edge of a brand new day, where the sky blushes with the first shy colors of dawn and the air still carries the coolness of night. You can almost feel God's light pressing gently against the horizon, ready to spill into every street and corner of your life. And it makes you wonder, what blessings has He tucked into today's hours, waiting for you to discover them? You probably won't survive this day without at least one surprise, one challenge, and one moment that takes your breath away. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And in the comments, share with me, what does your morning look like right now? Is it coffee and quiet, or a rush to the door? Now, take a deep breath, feel the morning light on your face, and let's begin today's prayer together. The early Christians often greeted the sunrise with psalms, believing it mirrored the resurrection of Christ, a daily victory over darkness. Historians still argue whether these gatherings began before or after the rooster's call in Jerusalem's narrow streets. And here's a quirky fact. In some medieval towns, church bells rang not to wake people for work, but to wake them for prayer. You inhale slowly, and that very first breath feels like a sacred promise. It's not just oxygen. It's a gift whispered into your lungs by the one who chose to wake you this morning. You realize you didn't have to open your eyes today, yet here you are, alive, aware, and capable of praise. The psalmist's words echo in your heart, "Let everything that has breath praise the Lord." And you know that your first praise belongs to Him even before coffee, even before your feet touch the floor. In ancient Hebrew culture, the break of day was marked by the Shacharit prayer, a rhythm that placed God first before any other voice. Historians still argue whether King David himself composed portions of it, or if the words were passed down from older shepherd songs. And here's something you might find quirky. In the 17th century, some villages in Europe had knocker-uppers who went door to door with long sticks, tapping on windows to make sure believers rose in time for morning devotions. As you exhale, you imagine every worry leaving with it, replaced by gratitude. This breath, this heartbeat, this single moment, they are yours to lift back to God in thanks. You begin to feel lighter already. You draw back the curtains and stand at the window, letting the light spill over your face like warm water. The world outside is painted fresh, dew on the grass, rooftops glistening, clouds tinged with gold. Every color feels more alive, as if God dipped His brush in joy this morning. You think about how each sunrise is a silent reminder. The same God who spun galaxies into motion cares enough to fill your small corner of the world with beauty. In early monasteries, monks often began their day by facing east toward the rising sun, as a physical act of turning toward the light of Christ. Historians still argue whether this practice came directly from the apostles or evolved from even older temple traditions. And here's a curious detail. In some Scandinavian towns, stained glass windows were designed specifically to catch the morning light, so the first rays would flood the church altar like a spotlight from heaven. You stand there longer than you planned, noticing how the morning seems to invite you in. The branches sway gently as though nodding in agreement. God has given you another day. Your heart whispers, "Thank you," and the gratitude feels as natural as breathing. You let your eyes close for a moment, and in the stillness, you picture believers from centuries past greeting the morning with song. Somewhere in Jerusalem's old stone streets, perhaps 2,000 years ago, a fisherman's voice might have carried through the dawn air, singing psalms before casting his nets. You realize that you're part of this same unbroken chain, waking, worshiping, trusting. The melody may change, the language may shift, but the heart is the same. The early church often gathered in homes at sunrise, breaking bread and praying together before heading into the day's work. Historians still argue whether this daily rhythm was inspired more by Jewish temple times or by Jesus' own habit of seeking the Father early in the morning. And here's a quirky tidbit. In certain coastal villages, conch shells were blown at daybreak to call people to prayer long before church bells existed. You hum, softly, maybe not knowing all the words, but knowing the meaning. Gratitude, surrender, hope. As you open your eyes again, you feel the same presence they must have felt. God here, in this quiet hour, turning an ordinary morning into holy ground. You step outside, and the morning air greets you like a cool, gentle hand on your face. There's a crispness to it, a purity that makes you want to breathe deeper. With every inhale, you're reminded of God's mercy, not stale or left over from yesterday, but freshly poured into this very moment. It's like the scent after a rainfall, washing everything clean, even the corners of your heart you didn't realize had gathered dust. In the Old Testament, the prophet Jeremiah wrote, "His mercies are new every morning." Historians still argue whether those words were first spoken as a personal lament or as a public declaration to encourage others in despair. And here's a quirky fact. In some ancient markets, bakers rose before dawn, not just to prepare bread, but to greet neighbors with the first warm loaves, which became a symbol of God's daily provision. You linger in that air, almost tasting the grace in it. The world hasn't yet rushed into its noisy rhythm, and in this stillness, you can feel God's kindness wrapping around you. You whisper thanks, knowing that this mercy will follow you long after the morning fades. You pause and listen, letting the quiet speak. Then gradually, the sounds of the morning gather around you. The layered chorus of birds greeting the sun. The soft rustle of leaves swaying in rhythm with the breeze. The faint hum of distant life stirring awake. It feels as if creation itself is joining you in prayer. Each note and movement a reminder that God's world is alive with praise. In the Psalms, nature is often called to worship. Mountains, rivers, trees, all lifting their voices to the Creator. Historians still argue whether these poetic lines were sung during temple ceremonies or recited privately by shepherds in the hills. And here's a quirky note. In medieval cloisters, monks sometimes trained birds to mimic snippets of hymns, turning their gardens into living choirs. You smile at the thought, realizing that the same God who hears a monk's hymn also hears a sparrow's chirp and your own whispered prayer. The wind brushes past you, almost like an unseen hand guiding your thoughts upward. For a moment, you say nothing at all, simply letting the sounds carry your heart toward God, trusting He understands every unspoken word. You realize that joy isn't something that simply appears when life feels perfect. It's a choice you make, often before the reasons to smile are clear. Standing there in the golden light, you decide to choose joy, knowing it's a spiritual discipline as much as an emotion. You let the warmth on your skin remind you that God's goodness is steady, even when the day ahead is uncertain. In the early church, joy was considered a mark of true faith, not because life was easy, but because believers trusted God's promises above their circumstances. Historians still argue whether some of Paul's letters were written during his imprisonments in full darkness or from guarded homes. Yet the joy in his words remains undeniable. And here's a quirky fact. In the 1800s, some communities rang small joy bells in the morning to remind people to greet the day with gratitude, no matter the weather. You smile inwardly, thinking how your own joy bell might be as simple as a whispered prayer or a deep breath in God's presence. The choice is yours, and today, you choose to let joy anchor your spirit before anything else has the chance to. Before the day can fill with voices and demands, you ask for something more precious than a perfect schedule. You ask God for wisdom. You know the hours ahead will bring decisions, big and small, and you want each choice to reflect His heart, not just your own quick thinking. The morning light feels like a gentle teacher, urging you to slow down, listen, and let your steps be guided. In biblical times, wisdom was often pictured as a woman calling out in the streets at dawn, offering guidance to any who would pause to hear. Historians still argue whether this imagery in Proverbs came from a poetic tradition or from actual dawn gatherings in the city gates. And here's a quirky detail. In some ancient villages, elders would sit outside their homes in the early light, believing that decisions made in the morning carried more blessing because the mind was clear and the air was pure. You breathe in that same air, imagining God's counsel filling you like sunlight spreading through a room. You know that with His wisdom, even an ordinary day can become a masterpiece of quiet, purposeful living. You can already feel the world beginning to quicken. Traffic building, messages arriving, the hum of busyness ready to pull you along. But before you step into that current, you invite God's peace to stand guard over your heart. You picture it like a gentle shield, soft in appearance, but unshakable in strength, keeping the rush from stealing the calm you found this morning. In the New Testament, Paul wrote from prison about a peace that surpasses all understanding, a calm so deep it cannot be shaken by circumstance. Historians still argue whether he penned those words during a brief moment of quiet or in the middle of loud, crowded confinement. And here's a quirky fact. In some old European towns, markets opened with a prayer bell, signaling not only the start of trade, but a moment for merchants and shoppers alike to breathe, center themselves, and begin without haste. You take that same approach now, choosing not to match the world's frantic pace. Instead, you let God's peace flow through you like steady water, knowing it will move with you into every conversation, every errand, every unseen challenge ahead. You think about the weight of the day ahead, the responsibilities, the conversations, the unknowns, and you know you can't carry it all in your own strength. So you lean into God, asking Him to be the steady current beneath your steps. It's not about pushing harder. It's about letting His strength become your own, like a vine feeding the branch with life. In Isaiah's time, the promise was clear. God gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. Historians still argue whether those words were first delivered to a nation in exile or to individuals in personal despair. And here's a quirky bit of history. Some 19th century rail workers in America began their shifts with short prayers for iron strength, believing that faith could steady their bodies for the labor ahead. You feel the truth of that now. His strength isn't loud or flashy. It's quiet and constant, meeting you exactly where you are. You let go of the pressure to have it all together, and instead, you rest in the assurance that God will carry you through each moment, from sunrise to the final light of day. As the morning settles around you, you think about the people in your life, the ones who lift you up, and the ones whose words have left marks. You feel the nudge to start the day with a clean heart, releasing any grudges that might weigh you down. Forgiveness isn't excusing what was wrong. It's placing the burden in God's hands so it no longer steals your peace. In Jesus' teaching, forgiveness was woven into daily prayer, as natural and necessary as asking for bread. Historians still argue whether the Lord's Prayer was first spoken on a quiet hillside to a few disciples or in a crowded place where strangers could overhear. And here's a quirky note. In certain Celtic villages, families were encouraged to wash the heart each morning, often by reciting blessings for those they struggled to love, before speaking to anyone else. You whisper a name or two, maybe through clenched teeth at first, but you offer them to God anyway. You feel the lightness that follows, like a window opening to let fresh air in. The day feels clearer now, free from yesterday's shadows. You glance around and begin to notice the small things, the steam rising from your cup, the way sunlight dances on the wall, the faint smell of something baking down the street. These aren't grand miracles, yet they stir a quiet joy in you. You realize that God scatters blessings like these across your path, not to be overlooked, but to be savored as gentle reminders of His love. In Scripture, Jesus often pointed to small, ordinary things, lilies in a field, sparrows in the air, to reveal God's care. Historians still argue whether His references came from specific moments in His travels or were drawn from the familiar sights of Galilee's countryside. And here's a quirky fact. In Victorian England, some families kept gratitude journals where they recorded tiny daily joys, believing it kept the spirit humble and the heart light. You let your eyes rest on one of those little blessings now, allowing it to slow your breathing and deepen your gratitude. It's in these small, unnoticed gifts that you remember. God doesn't just work in the grand and the urgent. He's here in the simple and the quiet too. You think about the plans you've made for the day, the tasks, the hopes, the things you'd like to see happen, and you gently place them into God's hands. Trusting His path doesn't mean giving up on your dreams. It means believing His way is wiser, even when it takes you in directions you didn't expect. There's a certain relief in loosening your grip, knowing you're being led by the one who sees the whole map. In Proverbs, the call is clear. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. Historians still argue whether these verses were written as personal advice from a father to a son, or as a public teaching for the community's leaders. And here's a quirky note. In some seafaring towns centuries ago, sailors would set their course each morning, but still offer a prayer, fully aware the wind could change everything by noon. You take that same posture now, making plans, but holding them lightly. You trust that wherever today's path bends, God has already walked ahead of you, preparing each step. You picture stepping out into the day with God walking right beside you. Every errand, every conversation, every quiet moment, none of it happens alone. You imagine His presence like the steady warmth of sunlight on your shoulder. Even when clouds pass overhead, the thought brings a calm assurance that no matter what you face, you are never without His guidance and care. In the Gospels, Jesus promised, "I am with you always, even to the end of the age." Historians still argue whether these words were first spoken on a Galilean hillside or closer to Jerusalem before His ascension. And here's a quirky fact. In some old European villages, people would draw a small cross in the dust of their doorstep each morning, a symbolic way of inviting God to walk out the door with them. You carry that same invitation in your heart now. Whether the road today is smooth or steep, you know His steps will match yours, and His presence will turn even the most ordinary path into sacred ground. You take one last deep breath before the day truly begins, sealing everything you've felt and prayed into your heart. Gratitude for the breath in your lungs, joy for the light on your face, peace for the moments ahead, all of it gathered and lifted to God. You thank Him not only for the blessings you've seen this morning, but also for those yet to be revealed as the hours unfold. In the early church, believers often ended their morning devotions with a spoken blessing, sending one another into the day with hope. Historians still argue whether these blessings were adapted from Old Testament priestly prayers or created fresh for the growing Christian communities. And here's a quirky note. In some rural parishes, a single candle was lit after morning prayer, left to burn until sundown, as a quiet reminder of God's constant presence. You carry that image with you now, a light that doesn't fade, a presence that doesn't leave. With a heart full of trust, you step forward, ready to walk through this day with God's peace as your companion and His love as your strength. And now, as the morning settles into the rhythm of the day, let your breathing slow and your thoughts soften. Feel the warmth of God's presence surrounding you, steady and unhurried, carrying you through each moment ahead. Whatever this day holds, you are not walking into it alone. His love will cover you, His wisdom will guide you, and His peace will steady you. Let every step be a quiet conversation with Him, every glance a reminder of His goodness. May your heart stay light, your spirit stay strong, and your path be blessed, from sunrise to sunset.